Have you ever been treated like you were invisible? Like you were nothing more than a piece of furniture in someone else's life? Imagine giving 3 years of your life to a man, supporting him from the shadows, only to be handed divorce papers on your anniversary because his family thinks you're too poor for their reputation. They thought she was a penniless orphan. They didn't know she was signing to the checks that kept their entire city running. When Liam Prescott threw his wife out on the street, he didn't realize he wasn't just losing a wife. He was declaring war on the owner of the very company that was about to buy him out. Grab your popcorn. This is the story of the ultimate regret. The chandelier in the dining room of the Prescott estate was an antique baccarat, reportedly worth more than most people's homes. It cast a fracturing, prismatic light over the table, illuminating the tension that had settled over the dinner like a thick, suffocating fog. Charlotte sat at the far end of the mahogany table, her hands folded quietly in her lap. She was wearing a simple, off-the-rack navy dress she had bought at a department store 3 years ago. It was clean, modest, and entirely out of place amidst the sea of Gucci silk and Armani velvet worn by the rest of the Prescott family. Across from her, her mother-in-law, Beatrice Prescott, swirled a glass of 1982 Chateau Margaux, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Charlotte. Beatrice was a woman who wore her wealth like armor. Tonight, she was clad in a Chanel tweed suit that screamed old money, though everyone in the finance world knew the Prescott shipping empire was currently leveraging debt to stay afloat. "Liam," Beatrice said, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "Is she going to sit there all night without saying a word? It's unnerving, like having a servant join us for dinner, but without the utility of actually clearing the plates." Charlotte didn't flinch. She was used to this. For 3 years since she had married Liam Prescott, she had been the orphan girl, the gold digger, the mistake. They knew her only as Charlotte, the girl Liam met at a coffee shop. They knew she had no parents, no visible job, and seemingly no ambition. Liam Prescott, a handsome man with a jawline that had graced local business magazines and a weakness for his mother's approval, sighed. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit and refused to look Charlotte in the eye. "Mother, please," Liam muttered, though there was no heat in his defense. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus that Charlotte had secretly arranged for him to acquire off a wait list, though he believed it was sheer luck. "We have things to discuss." "Happy anniversary, Liam," Charlotte said softly. Her voice was calm, melodic, and possessed a dignity that usually infuriated Beatrice. Liam flinched. "Right. The anniversary. 3 years, Charlotte noted. I made your favorite, beef Wellington. It's in the kitchen, keeping warm, though I suppose the chef has already served the squab." "We aren't eating your cooking tonight, Charlotte," Beatrice snapped. "We have serious family business. Business that concerns the future of Prescott shipping. Something you wouldn't understand with your limited background." The double doors to the dining room opened. It wasn't a server. It was a tall, leggy, blonde woman wearing a red dress that cost more than Charlotte's entire visible wardrobe. It was Tiffany St. Clair, the daughter of a steel magnate. She walked in with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her life. "Am I late?" Tiffany cooed, walking straight to Liam and placing a hand on his shoulder. She didn't look at Charlotte. To Tiffany, Charlotte was furniture. Charlotte looked at Liam. "Liam? Why is Tiffany here on our anniversary?" Liam took a deep breath. He finally looked at her. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth she had seen in them 3 years ago when he was a struggling VP trying to prove himself to his father. Now that he was CEO, he had become different, harder. "Charlotte," Liam said, reaching into his inner jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a jewelry box. He didn't pull out a card. He pulled out a thick, folded document bound in a blue legal backer. He slid it across the polished mahogany. It stopped inches from Charlotte's hand. "This isn't working," Liam said, his voice steady, rehearsed. "It hasn't been working for a long time. You don't fit in my world, Charlotte. You never have." Charlotte looked down at the papers. In bold, capitalized letters, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." "Divorce?" Charlotte asked. She didn't cry. The lack of tears seemed to annoy Beatrice even more. "It's an annulment, preferably," Beatrice interjected, sipping her wine with a cruel smile. "But a divorce will do. Liam needs a partner, Charlotte, a power partner. The Prescott empire is merging with the St. Clair steel interests. It's a strategic alliance. Tiffany can bring capital, connections, and prestige to this family. You bring what exactly? Silence? Mediocrity? I bring loyalty," Charlotte said quietly. "I brought her home." "Homes don't pay the creditors," Liam snapped, his temper flaring. "Look, Charlotte, be reasonable. My company is facing a liquidity crisis. The logistics market is brutal right now. I need the St. Clair merger to survive. Tiffany expects to be my wife. I can't be married to a nobody when I'm trying to close billion-dollar deals." "A nobody," Charlotte repeated, testing the word. "Here," Liam said, pointing to the papers. "I'm being generous. There's a check in there for $50,000. It's more than you've ever seen in your life. Take it. Sign the papers. Move out tonight. Beatrice has already called a car for you." Tiffany giggled, covering her mouth. $50,000. Liam, you're a saint. She can probably buy a trailer with that." Charlotte stood up. The movement was so graceful, so fluid, that for a split second she looked taller than everyone in the room. She picked up the papers. "You want me to sign these? Right now?" "Yes," Liam demanded. "Don't make a scene." Charlotte reached into a cheap purse and pulled out a pen. It wasn't a cheap Bic. It was a Mont Blanc Meisterstück, though in the dim light they didn't notice. She flipped to the back page, signed her name with a flourish, and closed the folder. "Done," she said. She didn't take the check. She left it on the table. "You're forgetting the money," Beatrice sneered. "Don't try to play proud, girl. You'll starve without us." "I don't need your money, Liam," Charlotte said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steel. "And as for the St. Clair merger, I wouldn't bank on it. Steel prices are down 12% this quarter due to the tariffs in the East. It's a bad investment." Liam laughed, a harsh, barking laugh. "And what would a housewife know about global steel tariffs? Get out, Charlotte, before I have security drag you out." Charlotte turned. She looked at Liam one last time. "Goodbye, Liam. When you realize what you've done, do not come looking for me." She walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She didn't look back. She walked out of the front door of the Prescott Manor and into the cool night air. A beat-up taxi was waiting at the gate, Beatrice's final insult. But Charlotte didn't walk toward the taxi. She walked past it, down the long, winding driveway to the main road. She pulled her phone out of her purse. It wasn't the cracked iPhone 8 she kept for appearances. She tapped a pattern on the screen, unlocking a secure satellite line. "Status?" she said into the phone. A crisp British voice answered immediately. "Waiting for your command, ma'am. The convoy is 2 minutes out." "Good," Charlotte said. "And prepare the jet. We're going to New York. The board of directors needs to know that I'm back." "And the Prescott file, ma'am?" "Activate it," Charlotte said, her eyes reflecting the headlights of the approaching cars. "They wanted a business lesson. Let's give them one." 2 minutes later, the darkness of the country road was shattered by blinding LED headlights. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't an Uber. 3 black SUVs, Cadillac Escalade ESVs, with reinforced ballistic plating, screeched to a halt in perfect formation. A sleek, silver Rolls-Royce Phantom followed them, gliding to a stop like a ghost. The doors of the SUVs flew open. 6 men in earpieces and tactical suits stepped out, scanning the perimeter. One of them, a man with a scar running down his cheek named Marcus, her head of security, rushed to Charlotte. "Miss Vance," Marcus said, bowing his head slightly. "We received the signal. Are you injured?" "Only my pride, Marcus, and barely that," Charlotte replied. She shed the persona of the meek housewife, like a snake shedding dead skin. Her posture straightened, her gaze sharpened. The chauffeur opened the rear suicide door of the Rolls-Royce. Charlotte slid into the interior, which smelled of lamb's wool and rich leather. Inside, a man was already waiting. He was older, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Liam's car. This was Alexander Thorne, her personal attorney, and the acting chief operating officer of Vance Global. "Rough night?" Alexander asked, pouring a glass of sparkling water from the crystal decanter. "Predictable," Charlotte said, taking the glass. "Liam filed for divorce. He's merging with the St. Clairs." Alexander chuckled dryly. "The St. Clairs? They're under investigation by the SEC for inflating their assets. If Liam merges with them, Prescott Shipping will be insolvent within 6 months. He doesn't know that," Charlotte said, sipping the water. "He thinks he's upgrading." "So," Alexander opened a tablet. "The masquerade is over. 3 years of playing the supportive wife to a man who couldn't see the diamond in his pocket. What is your move, Charlotte? Do we liquidate his assets? We hold the majority of his debt through our shell companies." Charlotte looked out the window as the convoy sped toward the private airfield. "No, not yet. Liquidation is too quick, too painless. He humiliated me, Alexander. He let his mother treat me like a dog. He replaced me with Tiffany St. Clair." She tapped her fingers on the leather armrest. "I want to buy them," she said. Alexander paused. "Buy Prescott Shipping?" "No," Charlotte corrected him. "I want to buy the ground they stand on. Who is the primary investor for their new logistics hub, the one they need to save the company?" "That would be the Onyx Group," Alexander replied. "And who owns Onyx Group?" Alexander smiled. "You do, Miss Vance, through 3 layers of holding companies, of course." "Schedule a meeting," Charlotte said, her eyes cold. "Liam needs funding. He needs approval for the new hub. Let him come to Onyx. Let him beg for the money. I want to see the look on his face when he realizes who holds the leash." By the time they reached the private airfield, Charlotte's demeanor had completely shifted. She stripped off the cheap navy dress in the changing room of the Gulfstream Jiang 50ER private jet. She emerged wearing a tailored white power suit by Alexander McQueen, her hair pulled back into a severe, elegant bun. She put on her signature glasses, thick frames that made her look intellectual and dangerous. She clasped a diamond necklace around her neck, the Star of the East, a piece she had kept in a vault for 3 years. As the jet roared down the runway, climbing into the night sky toward Manhattan, Charlotte opened her laptop. The screen displayed the organizational chart of Vance Global. It was a conglomerate that touched everything: real estate, tech, pharmaceuticals, and private equity. Her net worth wasn't public knowledge, but in the circles that mattered, the whisper networks of Davos and Wall Street, Charlotte Vance was known as the Iron Orchid. She had inherited the company at 22 when her parents died in a plane crash. She had spent 10 years building it into an empire, but the isolation had been crippling. She had met Liam while trying to live a normal life, using a fake name, pretending to be poor to see if someone could love her for her, not her billions. She had her answer. "Alexander," she called out over the hum of the engines. "Yes, Mom? Get me the file on the St. Clair family. If Tiffany wants to play games, let's see how she likes playing against the house. I want their loans called in by Monday morning. Consider it done. And regarding Mr. Prescott? Let him enjoy his freedom for a few days," Charlotte said, looking at the clouds below. "Let him think he's won. The fall is always harder when you think you're flying." 2 days later, Prescott Shipping Headquarters. Liam Prescott sat in his office, rubbing his temples. The divorce papers were filed. He was technically a free man. Tiffany was already redecorating his apartment, ordering garish pink curtains that Liam secretly hated but didn't dare criticize. But the relief he expected hadn't come. Instead, a sense of unease gnawed at him. His CFO, a nervous man named Gary, knocked on the door and entered. "Sir, we have a problem," Gary said, sweating. "What now, Gary? I told you the St. Clair merger will fix the cash flow." "That's the thing, sir," Gary stammered. "The St. Clair assets, they're frozen." Liam stood up. "What? Why?" "SEC investigation. It hit the news an hour ago. Their stock plummeted 40%. The merger is dead in the water, Liam. If we merge with them now, we anchor ourselves to a sinking ship." Liam felt the blood drain from his face. "That can't be right," Charlotte said. He stopped. He remembered Charlotte's parting words at dinner. "Steel prices are down. It's a bad investment." "How did she know?" he whispered to himself. "Sir?" "Never mind," Liam snapped. "Okay, forget St. Clair. We still have the Onyx Group deal, the funding for the logistics hub. That's our lifeline. We have the meeting with their CEO tomorrow in New York, right?" "Yes, sir. But what?" "The CEO of Onyx Group is notoriously private," Gary said. "No one has ever seen him, or her. They go by a proxy. But they sent a memo this morning. The CEO personally wants to oversee this negotiation." "That's good," Liam said, trying to convince himself. "It means they're serious. We go to New York. We charm them. We get the money. We save the company." "There is one more thing," Gary said, holding out a tablet. "The Onyx Group just bought the mortgage on your mother's estate." Liam froze. "What?" "Your mother's house. The manor. The bank sold the note this morning. Onyx Group owns it now. Technically, your mother is living in their house." A cold dread settled in Liam's stomach. This wasn't just business anymore. It felt targeted. "Who are these people?" Liam muttered. "We'll find out tomorrow," Gary said. "The meeting is at 10 a.m. at Vance Tower." "Vance Tower?" Liam frowned. "I thought Onyx had their own building." "They are a subsidiary," Gary explained. "A subsidiary of Vance Global." Liam shrugged. The name meant nothing to him other than it being a massive international conglomerate. He had no idea that the woman he had kicked out of his house 2 nights ago was the one who signed the lease on the building he was about to walk into. The following morning, the Manhattan skyline was a jagged jaw of steel and glass biting into the grey sky. Liam Prescott stood at the base of Vance Tower, craning his neck back. It was a monolith of black glass, standing 70 stories high, dwarfing the surrounding buildings on Fifth Avenue. It screamed power. It screamed untouchable wealth. Liam adjusted his tie, a red silk Hermes that Tiffany had bought him yesterday to bring him luck. It felt like a noose. "This is it," Gary, his CFO, whispered, looking equally terrified. "Vance Global. If Onyx is part of this. Liam, if we pull this off, we aren't just saving the company. We're moving up to the major leagues." "Let's go," Liam said, trying to summon the arrogance that usually carried him through these meetings. They entered the lobby. It was silent, vast, and smelled of white tea and money. The floors were imported Carrara marble. The security guards wore suits that fit better than Liam's. "Liam Prescott, here to see the CEO of Onyx Group," Liam told the receptionist, a woman with ice-blue eyes, sitting behind a desk that looked like a piece of modern art. She didn't look up from her screen. "ID, please." Liam blinked. "I have an appointment. I'm the CEO of Prescott Shipping." "ID," she repeated, extending a manicured hand. Flustered, Liam handed over his driver's license. She scanned it, her face impassive. "Top floor," she said, sliding a visitor badge across the marble. It was black with a simple gold chip. "Do not lose this. It grants you access to the elevator. If you lose it, the security system will lock down the floor." Liam took the badge, feeling like a schoolboy being scolded. He and Gary walked to the elevators. There were no buttons inside. Liam scanned his badge, and the doors hissed shut. The sensation of rising was seamless, smooth, and incredibly fast. When the doors opened on the 70th floor, they stepped into an open-plan office that overlooked the entirety of Central Park. But it wasn't an office. It was a sanctuary. There were no cubicles, only sleek glass pods. A man approached them. It was Alexander Thorne, the man who had been in the Rolls-Royce with Charlotte. "Mr. Prescott," Alexander said, his voice like dry parchment. "I am Alexander Thorne, Chief Operating Officer. We've been expecting you." "Good to meet you, Alexander," Liam said, extending his hand. Alexander shook it briefly, his grip firm and dismissive. "The CEO will join us shortly. Please have a seat in the boardroom." Alexander led them into a room dominated by a table made of a single slab of petrified wood. The chairs were Eames Aluminum Group management chairs, leather so soft it felt like skin. Liam sat down, his heart hammering. He opened his portfolio, laying out his charts and projections. "So," Liam started, trying to break the tension. "I didn't realize Onyx was under the Vance umbrella. It's impressive." "We prefer to keep our acquisitions quiet," Alexander said, sitting at the head of the table. "Efficiency is quieter than fame." They waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Liam began to sweat. "Is the CEO coming?" "Patience, Mr. Prescott," Alexander said, checking his vintage Omega watch. "She's a very busy woman." She, Liam thought. He hadn't known the CEO was a woman. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the far end of the room swung open. The room seemed to drop in temperature. First came the sound, the sharp, rhythmic clack, clack, clack of high heels on the hardwood floor. It was a sound of absolute authority. Then, she walked in. She was wearing a charcoal grey Tom Ford power suit, tailored to perfection. A silk scarf was tied loosely around her neck. Her hair was styled in a sleek, professional wave. She held a tablet in one hand and a cup of espresso in the other. Liam stood up to greet her, putting on his best charming smile. "Madam CEO, it is an honor to—" The woman stopped at the head of the table. She placed the espresso down. She looked up. Liam's voice died in his throat. His brain short-circuited. He blinked, sure he was hallucinating. The woman took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly with a microfiber cloth. She looked at him with eyes he knew better than his own. Eyes he had woken up to for 3 years. "Hello, Liam," she said. Her voice was the same, but it wasn't the soft, submissive voice of the wife who asked if he wanted cream in his coffee. It was the voice of a titan. "Charlotte," Liam whispered. The word came out as a squeak. Beside him, Gary gasped. You know her." Charlotte ignored Gary. She walked to the head of the table, opposite Alexander, and sat down. She gestured for Liam to sit. "Sit down, Liam. We have business to discuss." "Charlotte, what are you doing here?" Liam stammered, his legs giving out as he sank back into the chair. "Did you get a job here as a secretary?" It was a stupid question, born of denial. Alexander let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "A secretary? Mr. Prescott, you are addressing Charlotte Vance, the sole owner and CEO of Vance Global, the parent company of Onyx Group, and as of this morning, the owner of the debt on your entire fleet of cargo ships." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Liam stared at her. He looked at the suit, the jewelry, the way Alexander, a man who terrified him, looked at her with deference. "You," Liam pointed a shaking finger. "But you're poor. You were a barista. You drove a Honda." "I drove a Honda because I didn't want my wealth to define my relationships," Charlotte said, opening a file in front of her. "I wanted to know if a man could love me, Liam. Not the billions, not the jets. Just Charlotte." She looked him dead in the eye. "I got my answer 2 nights ago at dinner. You threw me away for $50,000 and a chance to merge with a fraud." "Fraud?" Liam's head was spinning. "The St. Clairs," Charlotte said calmly. "They are bankrupt. If you had checked the Asian markets like I told you to, you would have known. But you were too busy listening to your mother." Liam felt sick. The room was spinning. The woman he had treated like a servant was a billionaire. A multi-billionaire. "Charlotte, wait," Liam said, panic rising in his chest. "If this is true, then we're still married. Technically. I mean, the papers haven't been processed." He saw a lifeline. If they were still married, he had access to this. To all of this. Charlotte smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Actually, Liam, my lawyers expedited the filing this morning, and since we signed a prenuptial agreement, one that you insisted on to protect your family money, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is, well, currently also mine." "What do you mean?" "Let's look at the numbers, shall we?" Charlotte tapped the table. A holographic projector in the center of the table whirred to life, displaying a 3D model of Prescott Shipping's finances. It was a sea of red ink. The hologram rotated slowly, a ghostly blue and red skeleton of Liam's failing empire. Every loan, every debt, every leveraged asset was visible. "Your logistics hub," Charlotte began, her voice clinical, detached. "You need $200 million to complete construction. Without it, the zoning permits expire in 30 days. "Yes," Liam said, sweating profusely. "That's why we're here. Onyx, we're going to fund it." "Were," Charlotte corrected. Past tense. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city she practically owned. "Why should I invest in a company led by a man who makes emotional business decisions?" she asked, her back to him. "You fired your most competent logistics manager last month because he disagreed with your mother. You switched fuel suppliers to a more expensive vendor because the owner is a friend of Tiffany St. Clair." Liam gaped. "How do you know that?" Charlotte turned around. "I was there, Liam. I was in the room. I was cooking your dinner while you took the calls on speakerphone. I was folding your laundry while you complained about your staff. I know more about the internal workings of Prescott Shipping than you do." She walked back to the table and leaned over, placing her hands on the polished wood. "I know that you're skimming from the maintenance budget to pay for your mother's country club memberships. I know that your brand new fleet requires engine overhauls that you can't afford." Gary, the CFO, looked at Liam with wide eyes. "Sir, is that true?" Liam ignored him. "Charlotte, please, don't do this. It's business. Keep the personal stuff out of it." "You made it personal when you humiliated me in front of your mistress." Charlotte's voice rose, cracking the cool exterior for just a second. The raw pain flashed in her eyes, then vanished, replaced by steel. "However," she smoothed her jacket, "I am a businesswoman first. I am willing to offer you a deal." Liam let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Okay, thank you. What's the deal? Interest rates? Equity share?" "I don't want equity in a sinking ship," Charlotte said. "I want full acquisition." "Acquisition?" Liam balked. "You want to buy me out?" "I want to buy the company," Charlotte said. "I will absorb the debts. I will complete the hub. But the Prescott name comes off the building. The board is dissolved. And you—" she looked at him with pity. "You will be removed as CEO." "You can't do that!" Liam shouted, standing up. "It's my family legacy. My grandfather built this company." "And his grandson destroyed it," Charlotte said coldly. "Here are the terms." Alexander slid a contract across the table. "The purchase price is exactly $50,000, Charlotte said. Liam stared at her. $50,000? The company is worth millions." "The assets are worth millions," Alexander interjected. "The debts are also in the millions. The net value is zero. Actually, it's negative. Ms. Vance is being generous. She is offering you the exact amount you offered her to leave your marriage. It seems poetic, don't you think?" Liam felt the walls closing in. He looked at the contract. It was a complete surrender. "I won't sign it," Liam spat. "I'll go to the banks. I'll get funding elsewhere." "You can try," Charlotte said, sitting back down and crossing her legs. "But I own the bank that holds your primary mortgage. I own the investment firm that holds your equipment leases. If you walk out of this room without signing, I will call in every single debt by 5 p.m. today. Prescott Shipping will be in bankruptcy court by tomorrow morning." Liam looked at Gary. Gary was already packing his bag. "Gary?" "I'm sorry, Liam," Gary said, his voice trembling. "She has us. There's no way out. I have a mortgage, kids. I can't go down with this." Gary looked at Charlotte. "Ms. Vance, if there are any openings in your finance department—" "Leave your resume with the receptionist," Charlotte said, without looking at him. Gary nodded and practically ran out of the room. Liam was alone. Alone with the wife he had scorned and the lawyer who looked like an executioner. "You planned this," Liam whispered. "You planned this whole thing." "I plan to be your wife forever," Charlotte said softly. "I plan to help you fix the company from the inside, slowly, without bruising your ego. I was going to reveal who I was on our anniversary. I had the papers drawn up to transfer $50 million into your account as an anniversary gift." Liam's knees buckled. He fell back into the chair. $50 million? "But you served me divorce papers before I could give you the gift," Charlotte said. "You chose Tiffany. You chose the image over the reality." Just then, the elevator doors opened again. A flurry of voices echoed through the hall. "You can't go in there! Ma'am, you can't!" Tiffany St. Clair burst into the room, followed by 2 security guards. She was disheveled, her mascara running, clutching a designer handbag that looked like it had been in a fight. "Liam!" she shrieked. "Liam, you have to help me! Daddy's been arrested! The FBI is raiding the house!" She stopped when she saw Charlotte. She blinked, confused by the setting, the luxury, and Charlotte sitting at the head of the table. "You?" Tiffany sneered, though her voice wavered. "What is the maid doing here? Get me some water. I'm having a panic attack." Charlotte didn't move. She just smiled. "Miss St. Clair," Charlotte said coolly, "welcome to Vance Tower. I believe you're trespassing." "Vance Tower?" Tiffany looked around. "Liam, what is going on? Why is she sitting there?" "She owns it, Tiffany," Liam said, his voice hollow. "She owns everything." Tiffany froze. She looked at Charlotte, really looked at her, for the first time. She saw the Tom Ford suit, the confidence, the power. "That's impossible," Tiffany stammered. "She's a nobody." "Alexander," Charlotte said, sounding bored, "please escort Miss St. Clair out, and call the authorities. I believe the FBI is looking for her as well, regarding her involvement in her father's shell companies." Tiffany's eyes went wide. "No, Liam, do something." Alexander nodded to the security guards. They stepped forward, flanking Tiffany. "Liam!" she screamed as they dragged her backward. "You promised me. You promised to take care of me." The doors hissed shut, cutting off her screams. Silence returned to the room. "Sign the papers, Liam," Charlotte said, pushing a Mont Blanc pen toward him. The same pen she had used to sign the divorce papers. "Take the 50,000, pay your mother's country club fees, and start over. Somewhere far away." Liam looked at the pen. He looked at the woman he had lost. The magnitude of his mistake was a physical weight, crushing his chest. He realized then that he had never really known her. He had been in love with a reflection of himself, and when that reflection needed maintenance, he had traded her in. He picked up the pen. His hand shook. He signed. "Good," Charlotte said, taking the papers. "Now get out of my building." Liam walked out of Vance Tower, a broken man. The sun was shining, but the world looked grey. He held a check for $50,000 in his pocket, a pitiful sum compared to what he had just signed away. He didn't go home. He couldn't face his mother. He couldn't tell Beatrice Prescott that the orphan girl had bought their legacy for pennies on the dollar. Instead, he went to a bar. A dive bar in Hell's Kitchen, far away from the places where people knew his name. He drank cheap whiskey and stared at the news on the TV above the bar. The headline on CNBC made him nearly drop his glass. "Vance Global acquires Prescott Shipping in hostile takeover. Mystery CEO Charlotte. Vance emerges from shadows." The screen showed a photo of Charlotte leaving the building. She looked radiant, powerful, unstoppable. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Vance Global stock surges 15% on news of acquisition." "That's my wife," Liam slurred to the bartender. "Sure, buddy," the bartender said, wiping down the counter. "And I'm the King of England," Liam laughed. A bitter, jagged sound. "She was. I divorced her. Because I thought she was poor." The man next to him, a construction worker covered in dust, looked at him. "You divorced a billionaire because you thought she was poor? Buddy, you are the biggest idiot on the planet." "I know," Liam whispered. "I know." Meanwhile, at the Prescott Manor, the scene was one of chaos. Beatrice Prescott was in the drawing room, screaming into her phone. "What do you mean we have to vacate? This is my house. My family has lived here for 4 generations. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Prescott," the voice on the other end, a representative from Onyx Real Estate, said politely. "But the property has been foreclosed. The new owner has issued an eviction notice. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises." "Who is the new owner? I want to speak to them immediately," Beatrice demanded. "The deed is held by Charlotte Vance." Beatrice dropped the phone. It cracked on the floor. "Charlotte?" she gasped. "The girl?" She ran to the window. Outside, a moving truck was already pulling up to the gate. It wasn't just any moving truck. It was a high-end relocation service. And stepping out of a black SUV at the gate was Charlotte herself. She wasn't there to gloat. She was there to inspect her property. Beatrice ran out the front door, her Chanel suit disheveled. "You!" Beatrice shrieked. "You witch! You tricked us! You lied to us!" Charlotte stood by the gate, her security detail keeping Beatrice at a distance. "I never lied, Beatrice," Charlotte said calm. "I just didn't tell you what you didn't ask. You never asked me about my family. You never asked me about my work. You only asked me to pass the salt and stay out of the photos. You can't take my house, Beatrice sobbed, her dignity crumbling. Where will I go? I believe there are some very affordable apartments in Queens, Charlotte said. Or perhaps you can stay with Tiffany St. Clair. Oh, wait, she's in federal custody. My apologies. Charlotte signaled to the movers. Proceed. I want everything catalogued. The antiques are to be auctioned off for charity. Specifically, a charity that supports women starting over after divorce. Beatrice fell to her knees in the driveway, weeping. It was a pathetic sight. The woman who had terrorized Charlotte for 3 years was now nothing more than a tenant being evicted. Charlotte turned to Marcus, her bodyguard. Let's go. I have a board meeting in Tokyo tonight. Yes, Ms. Vance. As the car pulled away, Charlotte didn't feel the rush of joy she expected. She just felt a profound sense of closure. The chapter was done. The book was closed. But the story wasn't over for Liam. 6 months had passed since the day the Prescott empire crumbled. To the world, the transition had been seamless. Vance Global had absorbed the shipping lanes, rebranded the fleet, and the stock price had stabilized. The Prescott name had been chiseled off the headquarters, replaced by the sleek, minimalist V logo of the Vance conglomerate. For Liam, however, time had become a slow, suffocating loop of regret. He lived in a 4th-floor walk-up in Astoria, Queens. It was a studio apartment that smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage and damp drywall. The heating radiator clanked violently in the night, keeping him awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling. He had $50,000 when he left the tower. That money was gone. Most of it had gone to pay off personal debts that Charlotte hadn't absorbed. Credit cards his mother had maxed out in his name, the lease break fee on his luxury apartment, and legal fees for a lawyer who ultimately told him he had no case against the prenuptial agreement. Liam sat at his small, wobbly kitchen table, an IKEA reject he found on the curb, staring at his laptop. He was on LinkedIn. Application status: rejected. It was the 20th rejection this week. He wasn't just unemployed, he was toxic. In the tight-knit world of New York logistics and finance, word traveled fast. He was the man who had driven a legacy company into the ground. He was the CEO who let his mother run the board. He was the fool who divorced Charlotte Vance. He closed the laptop and rubbed his face. His hands were rougher now. He had taken a temporary job stocking shelves at a grocery store just to pay the rent. The irony wasn't lost on him. He used to complain if the help didn't arrange the pantry labels facing out. Now he was the help. His phone buzzed. It was his mother, Beatrice. He stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hello, Mother." "Liam!" Beatrice's voice was shrill, panicked. "They cut the power again. You have to send money. I can't live like this. The apartment is freezing, and the neighbors cook curry all day. The smell is seeping into my coats." "I don't have any money, Mother," Liam said, his voice flat. "I get paid on Friday. I can send you $50 then." $50? That won't even cover my dry cleaning." "Then stop dry cleaning your clothes," Liam snapped, his patience finally snapping. "Wash them in the sink like I do. We are poor, Mother. When are you going to understand that? We are the people you used to make fun of." "It's her fault," Beatrice hissed. "That girl, that viper, she stole everything." "She didn't steal it," Liam said quietly. "We gave it to her. We handed it to her on a silver platter because we were too arrogant to see what was right in front of us." He hung up. He couldn't do it anymore. He put on his coat, his old Brioni wool coat, now slightly frayed at the cuffs and missing a button, and walked out into the cold November rain. He walked past a newsstand. There, staring back at him from the cover of Time magazine, was Charlotte. The headline read, "The Quiet titan. How Charlotte Vance is revolutionizing global trade. She looked magnificent. She was wearing a deep emerald gown, standing on the deck of a ship, the wind catching her hair. She didn't look like the quiet girl who made his coffee. She looked like a queen. Liam bought the magazine with his last $5. He took it to a park bench and sat in the drizzle, reading the interview. "I learned a lot about resilience in my 20s, Charlotte was quoted as saying. "I learned that true worth isn't found in a bank account. It's found in character. I spent 3 years observing people who had everything but possessed nothing. It taught me exactly who I didn't want to be." Liam closed the magazine. The rain soaked the paper, warping Charlotte's face. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the wet page. "I'm so sorry." But the paper didn't answer. The world didn't care about his apology. The karma he had accrued was a debt that couldn't be paid off with words. 1 year later, the Metropolitan Museum of Art Gala, the biggest social event of the New York calendar. The theme was Gilded Resurrection. The red carpet was awash with celebrities, tech moguls, and old money families. The flashbulbs were blinding, a strobe light of excess. Liam Prescott was there. But he wasn't walking the carpet. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a white waist jacket and black trousers. He was standing by the valet stand, holding a ticket booklet. He had finally found steady work with a high-end valet service. It was humiliating, physically demanding, and paid minimum wage plus tips, but it was honest. "Check the Mercedes," his manager barked. "And be careful with the clutch, it's vintage." "Yes, sir," Liam muttered. He jogged over to a vintage 1955 Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing that had just pulled up. It was a car worth millions. He opened the passenger door. A woman stepped out. The breath left Liam's lungs. It was Charlotte. She was wearing a custom Versace gown that shimmered like liquid gold. Diamonds dripped from her ears. She looked happier, healthier, and more radiant than he had ever seen her. She wasn't alone. Stepping out of the driver's side was a man. He was tall, with kind eyes, and a rugged look. Maybe an architect or a doctor. He wasn't wearing a suit of armor like the business sharks Liam used to know. He looked at Charlotte with total adoration. He offered her his arm, not as a prop, but as a partner. Liam froze. He should have looked away. He should have hidden his face. But he couldn't. Charlotte adjusted her shawl and looked toward the valet stand. Her eyes scanned the line of workers. And then they stopped. She saw him. Liam felt exposed, stripped naked in front of the entire world. Here he was, the ex-husband who had thrown her out, now parking her car. He waited for the smirk. He waited for her to point him out to her new partner and laugh. He waited for the anger. But there was none of that. Charlotte's expression softened. It wasn't pity. It was simply recognition, acknowledgement of a stranger she used to know. She walked up to him. The crowd seemed to fade away. "Hello, Liam," she said. "Charlotte," Liam choked out. He gripped the valet ticket so hard his knuckles turned white. You look beautiful." "Thank you," she said politely. "I read about the Clean Oceans Initiative." Liam rambled, desperate to say something meaningful. "What you're doing with the fleet, it's amazing. I never knew you cared about the environment." "There was a lot you didn't know, Liam," she said gently. The man beside her stepped up. "Is everything all right, darling?" "Yes, James," Charlotte said, placing a hand on the man's chest. "This is Liam. An old acquaintance. Acquaintance. Not ex-husband, not the love of her life. Just someone she used to know. The word cut deeper than any insult." James smiled and extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Liam. James Sterling. I'm a pediatrician." Liam shook the hand of the man who had taken his place. James's grip was warm and genuine. He didn't know who Liam was. To him, Liam was just the valet. "Nice to meet you," Liam whispered. "We should go in," Charlotte said to James. "The auction starts in 10 minutes. She turned back to Liam. She opened her clutch, a Judith Lieber crystal bag, and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "Here," she said, holding it out. Liam recoiled. "No, Charlotte, please, I can't take your money, not like this." "Take it," she insisted, pressing it into his hand. "It's cold out here. Buy yourself a warm meal tonight, for old times' sake." She didn't wait for an answer. She took James's arm, and they walked up the red carpet, the cameras flashing, the crowd parting for the Queen of New York and the man who loved her. Liam stood alone by the curb, the $100 bill crinkled in his palm. He watched until she disappeared through the great bronze doors of the museum. "Hey, Prescott," his manager yelled. "Quit daydreaming. We got a Ferrari pulling up. Move it." Liam blinked, clearing the tears that had gathered in the corners of his eyes. He shoved the money into his pocket. "Coming," he yelled back. He ran towards the Ferrari, head down, back to work. Years later, the story of the Prescott divorce became a cautionary tale in business schools. It was a case study in due diligence and humility. Professors at Wharton and Harvard would project the stock chart of Prescott shipping on the screen. "Here," they would point to the sharp drop. "This is where arrogance cost a legacy." And here, they would point to the meteoric rise under Vance Global. "This is where visionary leadership took over." Liam Prescott never returned to the high life. He never remarried. He eventually moved out of the city to a small town in upstate New York. He got a job managing a small hardware store. It was quiet work. Simple. He lived in a small cottage. He adopted a stray dog. He reconnected with the simple things: cooking, reading, walking in the woods. One snowy evening, he sat by his fireplace. He was older now, the grey in his hair matching the winter sky. On his mantel, there was only one framed photo. It wasn't of his family estate. It wasn't of his yacht. It was a blurry, candid photo taken years ago at a coffee shop. A woman with messy hair was laughing, holding a croissant. It was Charlotte, before the money, before the betrayal. He picked up the photo. He realized now that the drama of his life wasn't that he lost $1 billion. The tragedy wasn't the poverty. The tragedy was that he had held the entire universe in his hands, and he dropped it because he was too busy looking at himself in the mirror. He placed the photo back on the mantel. "Happy birthday, Charlotte," he whispered to the empty room. Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the past, layer by layer, in cold, white silence. Wow. Talk about a reality check. Liam spent his whole life chasing status, only to realize that the most valuable thing he had was the woman sitting right across from him at the dinner table. It's a brutal lesson. Never underestimate someone just because they don't flaunt what they have. True power is quiet. True wealth doesn't need to scream. What would you have done if you were Charlotte? Would you have given Liam a second chance? Or was his betrayal too deep to forgive? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about hidden identities, billionaire revenge, and shocking twists, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.